Steve Weish on deck today. Now, Steve, we know Tom Brady has basically defied Father Time, but that's a pretty lofty standard for Matt Ryan or any mere mortal to reach, especially if his #1 target could be on his way out.
Oh, yeah, a whole lot to unpack here, MJ. And, boy, those talking heads suggesting that the Falcons may take a quarterback to replace Matt Ryan one day. Legitimate conversation. But you heard Ryan say right there, he feels he's got some years left. And clearly the organization does, too, because, as you mentioned, they drafted tight end Kyle Pitts instead of drafting his successor. So they believe in Ryan at least for this year. So that clearly is the path that they're taking, the way they're trying to shape the organization. But the one thing Ryan said he has to do right now is learn a new offense. Arthur Smith, it's a new language that he's learning. This is at least his 5th offensive play designer, play caller that he's played for. So he said there are some similarities to the West Coast systems he's played in before, but they've got a long way to go to get on track. Now, when it comes to some of the disenchantment that some veteran quarterbacks like Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson have shown, that's when Matt Ryan said, look, it's good that quarterbacks and players are speaking out, kind of showing their value. But at the same time, he said he's glad that the organization has always given him a voice and listened to him. But when he was asked how he would react if they drafted a quarterback, he said, I really don't know about that. And lastly, about Julio Jones, because the Falcons are listening to calls for teams possibly trading for him. That contract is very lofty. That's when Ryan said, look, I am not getting into the team's affairs. I am not getting into Julio's business, but I love Julio Jones. He's someone who makes the team better. In fact, Ryan said Julio Jones has probably had more impact on his career than any other player. That's saying a lot, seeing that Ryan has played with some pretty good ones, a.k.a. Hall of Famer Tony Gonzalez, and guys like Roddy White and Michael Turner as well.
Ooh. Well, Steve, like you said, there's a lot to unpack here. So, of course, we're looping in Michael Robinson, LaDainian Tomlinson for more on this conversation. Guys, Atlanta had the opportunity to take a QB or sign one. They opted to build around Matt Ryan instead. Will that strategy work, though, M-Rob?
Oh, wow, that's the million-dollar question. I'm gonna say no, right? Just simply because I think Julio Jones has had a lot to do with the success of a Matt Ryan. You talk about 60 touchdowns throughout his career, one of the most physically gifted specimens at the wide receiver position that our game has ever seen. So you look at the Atlanta Falcons situation, they're basically playing 2 quarterbacks. Both of these guys, you talk about Matt Ryan and Julio Jones, have large cap numbers. Matt Ryan has a $27 million cap number, Julio Jones $23 million cap number. So when I saw that they took Kyle Pitts with the #4 overall pick, if I'm Julio Jones, I think it's time to put that house on the market and go somewhere, and the Atlanta Falcons can get something in return. But the reason why I say I'm not so sure that the Atlanta Falcons can win a championship with Matt Ryan is just simply because I just feel like that offense needs a more dynamic quarterback. Not saying Matt Ryan can't throw the ball downfield. He still can do all of those things. But Arthur Smith came from an offense in Tennessee where I'm not saying Ryan Tannehill was a runner, but he was a little bit more mobile than a Matt Ryan, and they leaned on that running game. So I think Matt Ryan and the Atlanta Falcons offense has a long way to go, but I think that defense also has something to say whether this team gets to a championship.
Yeah, and Rod, I agree with you somewhat. I do agree with you that I'm going to say no, that I don't think the things that they have done is enough to put them over the hump. Because at the end of the day, guys, offense has never been the problem for the Atlanta Falcons, okay? This is a team that averaged 25 points per game. They gave up 26 points per game, okay? And what did you do? You go out and draft a tight end, which is fine, but now you're subtracting, talking about trading Julio Jones. So we don't even know if this offense is going to be better this year coming up. We don't know if they're going to be able to score 25 points a game. They still have to address the running back position. I know Mike Davis has come on, but Mike Davis has been a journeyman up until this point. Maybe he can, be the guy there, but I'm not so sure. And then defense, as I mentioned, is the biggest problem, okay? They still haven't addressed pass rushers. And at the end of the day, when it's time, when the game is on the line, the last 2 minutes of the game, you got to have a guy that can go get the quarterback, especially in that division. And Dante Fowler Jr. is the main guy on that team. He's just one man. They need more guys that can rush the passer.
Yeah, LT, that's a great point. Remember, they're switching to a 34 front. Now, you don't play your base front very often because you're nickel and dime so much, but this is where new defensive coordinator Dean Pease is really going to have to scheme up pressures because they don't necessarily have those 2 or 3 guys who can win those one-on-one battles all the time. So the defense is where Atlanta really has to do things. But in terms of them building around Matt Ryan, that was clearly a decision. When you look at the contract, if they try to draft another quarterback, then they're losing an impact player when you had a top 5 pick. That's a developmental player. That's a tough situation for them to be in. They're not the 49ers where they've got a Nick Bosa and a Fred Warner and Jason Verrett and all these guys all over their defense who can keep them afloat. This is a team that's got to continue to build. So to have Matt Ryan as a quarterback for 1 year, they decided to do that, build around him to have the pieces in place for when they do eventually make that transition to their next quarterback.
We saw the numbers right there for Matt Ryan. All time, he's in top 10 in almost every major metric there. So the numbers are solid for him individually. But we all know when a team isn't doing well, the QB tends to get a big chunk of the blame for that. Now, Arthur Smith, former OC, new head coach. We'll see how this offense, and I'm keeping it in the affirmative here, evolves with both Kyle Pitts and hopefully Julio Jones out there. All right, guys, thank you. Also on the podium today, Colts linebacker Darius Leonard. He says he loved the team's commitment to defense in the draft, and he hopes the team is willing to commit to him with a long-term contract extension before the season begins.
They take value in me, and hopefully, that'll show. I mean, I think that I put in enough work the past 3 years. I give it my all day in and day out, never miss a day. Never, once I step on that field, I give everything I got, and they know that. And, hopefully we get everything settled, and hopefully we'll be good to go.
Checking in with our NFL media insider, Ian Rappaport. Okay, Ian, how close are the Colts to working out a long-term deal with their star linebacker?
Well, the good news is the Colts and the representation for Darius Leonard, one of the best young linebackers in football, really one of the best defensive players, regardless of position. They have been talking. They have been engaged in long-term contract extension discussions, as Darius Leonard alluded to himself in his comments. As far as how close they are, there really is moving in the right direction, which I would say at least they are talking, and then there's done, and they are not done yet. Now, the benchmark for Darius Leonard is clearly going to be the $18 million a year of Bobby Wagner. Wants to be the highest paid off-the-ball linebacker, and based on his play, that would make a lot of sense. So I would not be surprised if that is around where he ends up eclipsing Bobby Wagner. The other thing to discuss here is the potential contract extension for Fred Warner. And Steve mentioned it just a couple of minutes ago. Another great young linebacker for the San Francisco 49ers. They also would like to lock up Warner, who also could eclipse Bobby Wagner. Those two sides have not started yet, but it's going to be interesting to see the timing of Darius Leonard and Warner to see who goes first in getting paid.
All right, Fred Warner, who just got engaged, by the way. Congratulations to him and his fiancée. Meanwhile, in D.C., Ian, the Washington football team is moving on from one of their longtime starters. What can you tell us there?
Yeah, this was a surprising one today earlier, MJ. Morgan Moses, who has been one of the most dependable and durable right tackles in the NFL for the last 5 or so years, started all 16 games, regardless of the circumstances. He was given permission, I'm told, to seek a trade, to find a trade partner from the Washington football team, which to me means a couple things. One, Washington is likely moving on without Morgan Moses, which, if you think about what they've done this offseason, they signed Charles Leno, gave him a bunch of money to play left tackle. They drafted Samuel Cosman. They brought in Eric Flowers, who they're also paying some money. Clearly, it is a monetary thing for Morgan Moses. And then it's really does someone pick up his $7.75 million of salary? Is someone willing to do that? Seems a little far-fetched.